We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, back finally off of hiatus. Happy Monday to everybody here. We're coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod and at YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. If you haven't already, give us a nice thumbs up. Give us a comment. Trying to interact with you guys more there, as we're now coming off of hiatus. No longer a hobbyist podcast, but actually jumping in, both feet in, to the professional podcast arena. I guess I'm not really sure where I stand at this point, but I'm going to give it the old college try. We have a new time, 12 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Friday, all the weekdays. We're restructuring the show, going to be a little bit more bite-sized, something that you can consume during a lunch break, maybe 30, 40 minutes tops. Get to some of the news you might have missed, might have slipped past your attention, or things that maybe catch my fancy that I want to bring to your attention that I think are important. Today, on this inaugural off of hiatus episode, will be no exception, because we're going back to the well, guys. If you're a longtime listener or viewer of the American Radicals Podcast, you know that as a two-time whistleblower against the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I am a zealot for civil liberties, and I really don't like government weaponization. So today, we're going to talk about two of the latest and greatest examples of FBI entrapment using the playbook, trademark TM, which I'll explain in a moment. But before we get to that, I want to maybe give some of the new people in the audience a little primer for who we are on this program, who I am. I said it. I'm an FBI whistleblower. Blew the whistle in 2022 about the FBI's weaponization against the January 6th investigations. ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, actually came out with some documents last year in the summer that verified that I was 100% accurate about that. Little fanfare, because that's what happens in the federal service if you bring forward a reasonable concern of waste, fraud, abuse, or risk of the public safety, a violation of ethics, morality, or the law, the Constitution. They want to bury it. So most people don't know that I was proven correct. Secondly, was fake reinstated over the summer of last year, and then kind of reinstated, but not really. I think I'm the only unarmed FBI agent since the J. Edgar Hoover days. And that happened late last year, just so the director of the FBI could give me his autograph on a letter that he signed saying I was fired because I criticized his abuse of power and the FBI's abuse of power against an innocent American who they accused of being the January 6th pipe bomber. That's me. What are we going to talk about today? Two entrapment cases, one out of North Carolina, one out of Texas. And before we get to all of that, we will give you a nice description, as we call it, of the playbook that the FBI likes to run. We'll get to that. And also I want to get to an element of artificial intelligence and how it can play into the way that the government is going to be going after the most vulnerable people amongst us. So sit back, relax, enjoy your lunch break on this inaugural episode of the American Radicals Podcast on a Monday at 12 o'clock. Let's get to it. And here, let's begin. I actually want to bring up this X profile from FBI Director Kash Patel to launch us off on the first case that I have, and that involves a young man out of Texas, 21 years old. And actually, before I get to all that, I think it's probably worth even just describing the playbook real briefly. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are on the internet, and let's say you're a vulnerable person, like low intelligence, financially indigent, emotionally disturbed, lonely, one of those characteristics, and you maybe have some bad ideas, and you find an individual who's your only friend in the world, and they become your friend. They, I would say, groom you for weeks, months, possibly years on end, into embracing your worst ideas and carrying them forward for the exact amount of money you have in your bank account, that's not your friend. That's a Fed, and that's the FBI playbook. They use confidential human sources, undercover employees to get people who are neither predisposed nor capable of actually carrying forward a terrorist attack in order to agree to do it so that they can spring the mousetrap, put you in jail for providing material support to terrorism, or in the case of our first individual, allegedly trying and attempting to provide bomb making parts to ISIS. So, what did the FBI director, who again, I have his autograph, say on his X account that's worth getting to launch us off? Director Patel says the FBI and our partners have arrested a 21-year-old alleged ISIS sympathizer in Texas following a terrorism investigation into attempts to provide bomb making components and financial support to a designated foreign terrorist organization. The accompanying piece that I have is actually from the Department of Justice, and that is this press release. Headline: Texas man charged with providing bomb components and funding individuals he believed were involved with foreign terrorist organization. Let's get to the details as we're wont to do, and we could do that by actually finding, and I did, the charging document. You'll notice it is a criminal complaint. Why is that important? Well, let me explain. In the federal system, in the FBI particularly, they're really well versed on bringing forward complex, long term investigations that do not necessitate what's called a criminal complaint in order to put your bad guy into handcuffs and arrest him. Typically, what will happen after months or more likely years of investigating a subject of a criminal case or a national security case, you will take that evidence to grand jury, present it, and get an indictment. And then you can get an arrest warrant and put your bad guy into custody. But the criminal complaint is sort of a way around that. And there are legitimate reasons to have a criminal complaint, exigency being chief amongst them. Like if there's a bank robbery, and let's say guy knocks over a bank on his way out, the local police roll up on him and grab him. Well, bank robbery is a federal offense. You don't really have time to build the evidence you need to then go to a grand jury, which might not be meeting at the time, might not be meeting for several weeks or even a month. You can do what's called a criminal complaint. And that's where the agent types up the information, brings it to a judge, and says, here's my probable cause to believe that this individual committed this crime. We need to arrest him. And once you do that, to get him in handcuffs, and you would follow the process afterwards, you would wind up going to grand jury to be doubly sure. But here, we went straight with the criminal complaint for an individual for exigency? No, not at all. Actually, they did it because it's a break glass in case of an emergency sort of situation that the FBI likes to have, because they have so many of these vulnerable people on the hook that they want to keep them in the weeds. And when they need them, when they need that really good headline, like if they're taking some bad press because they accused an autistic, innocent black guy living in Virginia of being the January 6th pipe bomber, when he's some sort of criminal mastermind who was able to elude an $11 billion law enforcement agency when he used his own car and cell phone and credit card for 5 years and bought bomb components years in advance of an election that he was protesting because he was somehow clairvoyant. I want to know that guy's picks for the national championship because I want to get rich. Let's say you have something like that. Well, then we can break the glass. We can go forward and arrest our bad guy when we really don't have a very strong case against this person. In fact, the entire reason we have a case is because we've entrapped them. Now, for the criminal complaint, this guy here, his last name is Garza, John Garza, Johnny Garza, actually, if it's Cash Patel, because he wants to sort of show how he's got that familiarity with an individual. But John Garza is the individual who was arrested via criminal complaint. Let me give you some of the details about how he got on the radar of the FBI and what they actually did to this man, not what he did. So, beginning in October of last year, FBI Dallas received reporting from the New York Police Department Joint Terrorism Task Force. Why? Well, because the JTTF in New York City, they make around $200 million a year from the federal government. Their directive is to bring fresh meat to the federal government, people who are vulnerable, who they can arrest as terrorists. So NYPD undercover online was able to interact with Mr. Garza. The undercover thought that it was important how Mr. Garza had this account on Instagram, and he wrote a comment on a pro ISIS post. So the undercover was just trolling Instagram for troublesome comments for fresh meat for the FBI. Now, it wasn't just what he said there. I mean, speech is speech. Theoretically, in the land of the free, you do have a First Amendment. The undercover reached out to Mr. Garza because he noticed that Garza had mutual brothers in common and that Garza had commented on a post that this undercover had loved because this undercover is playing a character. He's playing the character of an ISIS member, of an ISIS fighter in Iraq because Garza's lonely, wants to be friends with somebody. Maybe he's got some bad ideas. And this guy is like a Navy SEAL to him. The undercover suggested that Garza and the undercover should move their conversation to WhatsApp. Stick a pin in that. They took their conversation off of Instagram and they went to WhatsApp. Again, remember that for later in today's show. Now, Garza sent multiple official press releases, kind of like I'm doing here on the American Radicals podcast, from ISIS to this undercover because he was trying to impress his friend or recruit his friend who theoretically was supposed to be a member of ISIS. So I don't think Mr. Garza is very smart. He's just trying to make a friend. He also said, quote, "One day we will unite under a flag of jihad and be way stronger than before with God's permission," and that he has a lot of support here for jihad. Garza saying that in the panhandle of Texas, he has lots of support for jihad. No further information on that. Again, an idiot trying to impress his only friend. The New York undercover asked Garza if he knew anyone else in America, and he said, "I have more brothers with me." So he's putting up a front, and he's saying that I've got my own little terror cell here, and that could actually become concerning if you're an undercover officer or agent of the law and you're having an online conversation with an individual who you think might be a terrorist. You think, all right, well, maybe there is a cell going on here. It's pretty clear this guy's an idiot, but that doesn't mean he's not dangerous. But as it came to be, he doesn't have any friends. He's just trying to impress this person who he thinks is an ISIS fighter and is not. Back to the piece. Again, this criminal complaint came out. The FBI was mega Doppler proud of themselves. They issued a statement from the DOJ. The FBI director put out a post on X to say that they had cooperated with local partners in order to bring this individual to justice to save America. You're welcome. Don't worry about that pesky little January 6th pipe bomb case that we continue to entrap individuals over. And we can bring it back up from the criminal complaint. So in October, our bad guy, Garza, made comments suggesting that he was aware that law enforcement officers sometimes used online personas. And that's why he trusted this undercover, though, because Mr. Garza is low intelligence. And it's actually a little bit funny to have documentation of a person saying, "I know that you're out there trolling me, feds, and that's why I trust this person who is a fed." Garza offered to send money to the undercover, and this is where we get into a providing material support to terrorism sort of allocation. Now, why did he do that? Was it on his own initiative? Did he say, "Hey, it'd be awesome if I could get in on this entire scheme. Could I join ISIS? Nah, yeah, I live in Texas and you're in Iraq. That might be a little bit hard for me. I only make $32,000 a year, as is denoted in the charging document here. So not really killing it financially. Is he going to provide material support?" Well, the only reason he offered to do that was because the undercover pulled on his heartstrings 2 times, actually. He said, "Hey, I'm out there trying to shop for clothes. I'm fighting the good fight for jihad. I'm a member of ISIS. I need some money to buy myself clothes." And Garza is happy to lend a hand. And also, this fighter for ISIS says, "I don't have any equipment that I need." And we're back to Mr. Garza being pretty dumb and gullible. And he says, "Okay, how can I send you some money?" Well, that's where the government just is all too happy to cast that rod out there and lure you in. Because according to the charging document, this criminal complaint, the federal government established a crypto wallet. So Garza could send Bitcoin to an individual he believed was a member of ISIS. The original ask was for $50. $50. And Garza couldn't actually meet that demand. He only sent 20. So after he felt bad for his friend who needed a new pair of boots or a sweater or something to that effect, he says, "All right, I'll send you $20." He didn't know how to do it. In fact, the government had to not only set up the crypto wallet, they had to give him a full briefing on how to use cryptocurrency, how to acquire it, how to transfer it. He sends $20 in Bitcoin on two occasions. One of them was for the clothes. The other one was for weapons. And Garza's so gullible and so desperate for a friend that he accepts the explanation from his ISIS buzzy. Again, I'll use the air quotes, ISIS, because I have a new studio now. I'm no longer in the black. I have to dispense with this mythos of Steve Friend not having two appendages. If you're a longtime viewer of the American Radicals podcast, you'll know where I'm talking about. Now, Mr. Garza is so gullible, he thinks that $20 in Bitcoin is able to buy not one, not two, but three firearms, as evidence in the criminal complaint. In the criminal complaint, we've got three firearms and a heart emoji because Garza is super happy. He said, "Yeah, I'm glad I was able to buy those rifles for you with $20. I guess $20 goes further in Iraq than it does in America. They don't have to deal with Bidenflation there." Now, back again to the document, back to the criminal complaint, digging in. He's now provided material support to terrorism. And he gives a little bit of a problem. He maybe is expressing something here that could kill the entire case. Here's a quote: "I would never disobey my beautiful parents, but if it's for the sake of Allah and nothing else, and to commit jihad, then I will." Well, that's two ideas that contradict each other. So if mom says don't do jihad, he wouldn't disobey her. He really wants to. It seems like his heart isn't totally in it. It seems like if you were truly interested in correcting this guy, maybe you send an agent to his house and knock on the door. Now, you're allowed to engage in First Amendment protected activity. And I do agree that we're not the social worker police, we're the real police. There's a legitimate counter to this. But if you're really interested in public safety, what's stopping an $11 billion agency from sending a couple agents over to Garza's house and saying, "Hey, look, we're seeing you talking a lot online. You're allowed to do that. But if it goes beyond talk and it goes to something kinetic and dangerous and maybe potentially providing material to a foreign terrorist organization, we are a consequence of that." You could also ascertain whether or not Garza is retarded. Maybe he actually has to have full-time care from a guardian, as we'll see from the next entrapment case. But for this case, why wouldn't you say, "Hey, your mom would be really upset with you," and maybe get this guy back on the straight and narrow? But then you would jeopardize your entire case. You would lose out on that break glass in case of an emergency chance to get the press release, to break your shoulders, patting yourself on the back for saving America, so that people who don't take the time, like I did here, did actually read the charging document and find out what you did to a vulnerable person and how abhorrent and disgusting and dishonorable it actually is, they'll think, yeah, the FBI's saving America. So, to the criminal complaint on Mr. Garza. Not only is his mom potentially an inhibitor here to the FBI's case, they finally get to the moment. They get to the moment where they present Mr. Garza with his choice, his chance to back out, because this is how it has to go. The undercover told Garza, quote, "I never want you to feel you have to do anything, only what is in your heart." That's it. Because the way that the Department of Justice, and specifically the FBI, works itself around entrapment rules and laws, and they can entrap you in spirit, but not legally, is a presumption. The presumption is that you were always guilty, and you must 100% be proven innocent before they're willing to close out the case. And they're never really 100% sure. And they also have some administrative and bureaucratic reasons that they would not want to close out a case. Chief amongst them is that bosses get bonuses for having a certain number of cases on the books. But you could see here, they've given him this last attempt after grooming him for months and convincing him that an undercover guy online is some sort of a Navy SEAL for ISIS. It's his only friend in the world. Hey, it'd be great if you could send me some money. Actually, it'd be great if you could build me a bomb, maybe give me some bomb components if you can't build it. Can you help me out? It's, of course, up to you. If it's not in your heart, I completely understand it. We won't be friends anymore, but it's up to you. And the moment that you agree, the moment you're a vulnerable, low intelligence, lonely person, and you embrace your worst ideas and you go forward, then they've got you. And they can always tell the judge or the jury, we gave him a chance. He could have backed out, but he didn't. Now, beyond just providing the material support, we have a further example of luring this individual Garza in, and that is with the bomb component. The undercover asked Garza if he would be able to watch an instructional video, buy components, and give the components to another brother member of ISIS. Was he predisposed to do this at all? But for the undercover saying, hey, can you watch a video on how to make a bomb? And can you go out and buy that stuff for me? And could you give it to somebody else? That was entirely the creation of the government actor. And yet, the presumption is that Garza was always guilty. So Garza actually decides to do his worst ideas, and he starts buying what he believes are bomb detonator components, which he details. He actually types it out, and he calls it, I think, an experiment. Yeah, he does. Uh, Garza says he wants to do some operational security stuff, right? He doesn't want to get busted or caught. I mean, he knows that the feds are out there talking to people online. He doesn't want to get caught. So here's what he types up. And it's a little bit hard to see if you're watching here on rumble.com/AmRadPod or YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. It says the experiment. And he has 8 of the items on this list, and then he's got some other things he's got to get to build a detonator, which he thinks he can do. He can do it with a light bulb, battery, matchbox, sandpaper, piece of aluminum from a juice can, pen, and tape. MacGyver can't do that. He still has to go out get other things out there like a thermometer and ice and acetone, nail polish remover. He thinks that that is sufficient. Now, things progress quickly from there, and then we find ourselves in the final moments when the undercover who is online tells Mr. Garza, hey, I happen to have an ISIS buddy who lives nearby you. Can you bring him the bomb stuff? I know you can't build it, as Garza explains. I can't do it. I just don't have that capability. I can't figure it out, but I'll bring the stuff. And the FBI introduces not 2, but a third undercover who eventually meets with Garza and gets the nail polish remover. And now Garza has provided not just $40, but also bomb making components to somebody who he thinks is a member of ISIS, and he's arrested. Now, let me take it out of the context for those who might be thinking, hey, look, this guy might be mentally disturbed. He might be lonely, whatever it is. He was out there willingly talking to people, and maybe let's give a little bit of latitude to an FBI with a national security mandate and a directive. Maybe they really want to keep America safe. I don't want this guy out there. And what if he had actually found a member of ISIS on Instagram who was recruiting him in the panhandle of Texas? Spoiler, they don't do it that way. But let's just say that. Let's take it out of the national security context. Let's say you're online and you're lonely or you're dumb and you have one friend, and the friend comes to you and says, hey, I got a sick kid. Could you spare a few bucks? And you send 20 bucks. You send 40 bucks. And then that friend comes to you and says, hey, I really appreciate it. It's just not enough. Our expenses are just too high. But I think I have a solution. We've been friends for a long time. I really want to confide this plan with you. I have another friend. He works at the bank. He says that he can get you and me in the back door, in the vault, and we can take a couple $1,000s, and it'll pay for my little one's medical procedure. I mean, I know that sounds bad, but just think about it. The bank is insured. They'll be made whole. We're not going to be ripping into people's lock boxes, their security deposit boxes, and finding their grandma's pearl necklaces. We're just going to take a little bit of cash. And then that friend meets up with you and walks you into the bank and says, my daughter needs this or she's going to die from cancer. And you reach out and you pick up a $100 bill. And boom, flashbang at your feet. You're under arrest. You were always going to rob that bank. And that's where you see how the FBI playbook works, how it gets people who are vulnerable to embrace their worst ideas, to do something that they were never predisposed or capable of doing. Were you ever going to rob a bank but for your fake friend suggesting it to you and pulling on your heartstrings? It's the playbook. And it's just about undefeated, which is why it is a bee in my bonnet. It is something that I am endeavoring to bring to individuals' attention, particularly on this AMRAD pod, that this has to end. This is something I brought to the FBI director's attention. I actually had an in-person conversation with him back when he talked to me during the transition, when he was reaching out to the members of the suspendables, the suspended FBI whistleblowers who did the right thing and lost everything as a result. When he was asking us for policy suggestions, personnel suggestions, I said, you have to stop the entrapments. And he gave me the old thumbs up. And then he promptly lost all of our phone numbers. Now, I did promise a second one. So let's just churn through this one as well, because this was an even, I would argue, more gross example of the playbook, because it started when the person was a juvenile, a very vulnerable state for anybody, regardless of what sort of decisions they end up making in the future. So let's go back to the FBI director's social media page. This came out towards the end, a couple of days ago, January 2nd. Yeah, it was actually towards the end of last week. Kash Patel says, the FBI and partners foiled another potential New Year's Eve attack from an individual allegedly inspired by ISIS. He's going to do this on every holiday, by the way, for those who aren't paying attention. Well, we had a nice other piece. I get this one from Reuters. And you got a headline, a nice picture of, isn't this the face of evil? Kash Patel, director of the FBI. Headline from Reuters, U.S. says it thwarted potential ISIS-inspired New Year's Eve attack in North Carolina. And for bonus points, I did my research, guys. Here is the charging document. And I'll kind of mull through it a little bit just to give you the, I think, most important elements that are worth your attention. The first thing that I noticed was that this agent has been employed with the FBI since October of 2024. A brand new agent, on probation, willing to follow orders whenever asked to do it. Now, work through, I think we go down to, paragraph 7 on this one, and that's where they give you how bad this actually is. So the Charlotte division of the FBI opened a case on our bad guy here, whose name is Christian Sturdivant. We'll just call him Christian. They opened a case on him in January 2022, 4 years ago. At the time, he was a minor. You'll find out he was 14. Christian was in contact with social media with an unidentified ISIS member from a country in Europe. This is according to the FBI. It was actually a member of ISIS. Christian received direction from this unidentified ISIS member to dress in all black, knock on people's doors, and attack them with a hammer. Christian used his cell phone to communicate with ISIS members online. The FBI learned that in 2022, Christian did in fact leave his house dressed in all black to kill his neighbor with a hammer and a knife. But his grandfather was able to restrain him and bring him back home. And that's where we start launching things off 4 years later. So as a background, we know this is a crazy kid. He tried to engage in a violent activity 4 years ago at the age of 14. Does he need to be institutionalized? Does he need to be arrested? Whatever it was most likely adjudicated at a local level or even from the FBI because he's a juvenile. They didn't want to deal with it. He's been on their radar for 4 years. Was there anything in the intervening time? No, we just jumped ahead about 4 years towards the end of last year when they started investigating him again, or started. They were investigating the entire time, or at least the case was open. They were claiming it was open for the last 5 fiscal years. And now what's changed? Oh, he's 18. He's 18 now. He's an adult. We can put him in jail. Is he talking to the same ISIS member in Europe? No, no. He's talking to an online covert employee for the FBI, an undercover who's grooming him for, it's represented here, a matter of months, but I would contend it's likely a matter of years. Probably the entire time that he was 14, 15, 16, and 17 years old, an online undercover from the federal government kept him on the hook, cast that lure out there, and just waited, flipping the calendar days over, and waited until he turned 18 so they could spring the mousetrap. Now, what is actually in this mousetrap? I was able to dig through it, and they wound up getting this guy to say that he was going to go do the same exact thing, a planned attack. So they got a search warrant, kicked in his door, and went rooting around for the plan. Now, the plan, you would think, if you're doing something like really sinister and uber secret, you're doing it on behalf of ISIS, you think you would keep it stored somewhere that was secretive, maybe secure. I don't think you would actually leave it in your trash can, right? Well, Christian did. Here's a photograph. Underneath the Chick-fil-A box is where they found the plan at the FBI. Now, the plan was, I guess, to go do an attack at Burger King and then maybe at a grocery store. He wasn't sure which one. He was going to do it with hammers. And he also planned to kill between 20 and 21, oddly specific, almost like a Terminator, 20 and 21 people using a hammer and a knife at a Burger King and a grocery store. That's what Christian thought he was capable of doing. He had some other items in here where they found, and you can see, I'll throw the picture up there. You see that this was in the trash can, man. It was gross. It had liquid all leaking all over it. It's handwritten on notebook paper. This isn't a sophisticated dude, but he fit the bill. They were watching him long enough, and they were able to jam him up for plan A, which was the Burger King. And Christian said his weapon of choice was a knife. He was going to wear a mask. He was going to try to injure 8 people. And then also, when he went to the grocery store, his weapon of choice, again, a knife. But this time, in addition to wearing a mask, he was going to wear tactical gloves and a hat. And his goal was to get 11 or more people. And then while searching the house, in addition to finding his plan, his master plan, they found the weapons. There they are. You should know, it's, again, a little bit hard to see. There's 2 hammers and 2 knives. And according to what I read, the grandfather had already locked up his hammers. So Christian was able to acquire his own hammers, which are not prohibited items unless there's some sort of court order attached to them. I guess he could go to Home Depot and probably get them himself. But the FBI had their man. And now he's going to prison because he aged out. He's 18. We can go ahead and jam him up for providing material support to terrorism. No further information. No money sent. Actually, in the charging document, they asked if he could send them $500 or $600, and he said he could, and then he didn't. So I don't know what sort of material support they allege, the FBI, that Christian provided. And even if he did send $500, it went to the FBI, not to ISIS. So I don't know how he's really guilty of that. And we're back to the playbook. Again, find a vulnerable person. Introduce an informant, an undercover, get them to embrace their worst ideas. But this is really time consuming. It's really hard. There's 38,000 FBI employees, 13 to 14,000 agents. How are we able to do this? We need to keep more and more of these people on the hook. After all, there's lots of emergencies over the FBI. We might need to be breaking glass just on about daily basis. And that's where I want to bring it to the final piece that I want to talk about today. And it's a blast from the past to a certain extent. I guess Rose Lopez, our moderator over on rumble.com/amradpod. You're going to have to look up where this was. I brought this piece over from Wired, which was not a right-leaning source, but I do think it's worth reintroducing to the audience in the context of artificial intelligence and combining it with online activity and the FBI. The headline: this college protester isn't real. It's an AI-powered undercover bot for cops. And it talks about this program, which is called Overwatch. It's from a company called Massive Blue, and it's sold to police departments. It markets as an artificial intelligence-powered force multiplier for public safety. It deploys lifelike virtual agents, which infiltrate and engage criminal networks across various channels. It's a chatbot that goes out and, under benign, innocent reasons, could go and infiltrate a kiddie porn ring or a drug ring or a legitimate terrorist ring and engage in conversations and find and identify people who are problematic and alert law enforcement. That's at least how it's built. But remember what I told you. The whole conversation getting moved off of Instagram to WhatsApp, Overwatch can do it too. Now, if you were talking to a chatbot, I think at least at this point in the evolution of artificial intelligence, you could see how people could be fooled by it. I mean, relatively intelligent people could be fooled even. But certainly taking a conversation off of social media and then moving it over to a Signal or a WhatsApp or a Telegram, that seems like something a person would do. So you would think that you're getting rused by artificial intelligence, but this is capable of doing it. Overwatch is perfectly capable of taking that conversation. And you would think, well, this is a person now. Now, you might be concerned it's a Fed still, but I told you there's a limited number of people. It's true that we're all surveilled, but are we all being investigated? No, there just isn't that robust of an agency over at the FBI right now. 13,000 agents can hardly keep tabs or try to entrap 330 million people. But what if artificial intelligence is there? Well, that can just deploy by the tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands, and it can be awake 24 hours a day. One of the pitfalls of the FBI playbook, and it's a tongue-in-cheek joke, is if you're talking to somebody online who has all the same worst ideas as you and really wants to help you bring them about, but they're only available between Monday and Friday, 9 to 5, that's a Fed. Artificial intelligence, it's working 365 days a year, round the clock, rain or shine. What are the odds that this is going to be in the new FBI budget for next year or the year after? Because after all, we got to keep more and more people on the hook. We've got lots more emergencies that we have to distract from. So that's going to do it for this original relaunch episode of the American Radicals podcast. Was happy to bring to you something that's close to my heart, something I like to elevate and highlight, and that is a weaponized FBI. The ultimate solution to that, I think we all have come around to, is it has to go away. That'll be in some subsequent episodes. I guess I'll have to make that case. But for what it's worth today, I think it's worth getting to how this was really, the latest and greatest examples, an ultimate example of how, regardless of who you put in charge, if it's Kash Patel, if it's Christopher Wray, if it's Bob Mueller, Louis Freeh, what have you, any of these individuals, they are just all willing to do the exact same thing. All right. I think I do have a palate cleanse for you. Yeah, I sure do. I sure do. Guys, today's January 5th. So if my calendar is correct, I think it's the 12th day of Christmas. So it happened to get this in there. It relates to a new year. We are actually into 2026. We are at the very last day of Christmas, and this is the inaugural relaunch episode of the American Radicals podcast. So maybe I could leave you a note where you want to wish people a happy new year and do it in a way it's respectful to everybody's sensibilities. Don't do this one.
Happy New Year. I know what month it is. I know that's a confusing thing to hear outside of January, but I love saying Happy New Year. I go year round. I bring my Happy New Year's year round because everybody loves it. Happy New Year. Just feels good to say. Doesn't matter where you're from, your religion, your country, everybody celebrates it. It's not like Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas can go either way, and I hate to offend people. So this whole last holiday season, I didn't let out one Merry Christmas. That's true. Instead, I said, may the birth of the one and only true God Jesus Christ bestow a blessing of grace and peace upon your household, to the belittlement of every other false religion. lest you be gay. That's what I say.
That's not very nice, but it is funny. All right, guys, back with you tomorrow here on rumble.com/amradpod and on YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. And in the process of switching that one over to AmRadPod, and I'll alert you when it is that way. 12 o'clock Eastern time, Monday through Friday. Give us a nice share, a thumbs up, a like, do all the things, and leave us a comment. I'm going to try to interact with you guys more so there. So again, we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, have a good day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AM